I remember going to the grocery store and having every single credit card decline when I was trying to buy a rotisserie chicken for dinner. That's how tight money was back then. And I remember having a conversation with my husband and asking him, do we need to close down the studio? Do I need to go back into the workforce? And just questioning whether this path of small business ownership was for us. Were we making bad decisions this entire time? Should we pivot and go back to the life we hated, but had comfort in?
Hello and welcome to My Great Pivot, the podcast where we talk to female founders in all stages of the entrepreneurial journey. My name is Carrie Regan, and I'm obsessed with stories of entrepreneurs who risk it all to pursue their dreams. This week, I'm welcoming Alice Park, who left the security of a stable job at an engineering firm to launch her own photography business, Park Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm sure you'll be inspired by Alice's story and her ability to read the market, pivot when needed, and persevere. Please enjoy my conversation with Alice Park. Alice, welcome to the podcast. I'm dying to hear your story of what drove you to leave the comfort of a really secure job in a really secure industry and do this.
Well, I grew up with entrepreneurial parents. I just kind of always saw them chasing after their dreams, especially my father. And his story is very remarkable, actually. He left his small hometown in Taiwan at the age of 14, which is my son's age. It's crazy. With just a middle school education. He knew he did not want to grow up on a farm like the generations prior to him. And so he left that comfort, went off on his own to the big city. And he had one connection, which was a grocery store owner who hired him to be like his right-hand guy. So at 14 years old, he went to the big city and then worked his way up. And he did a few years in the city and then got an opportunity in Japan, which allowed him to get some restaurant experience. He started working in the restaurant just behind the scenes. He met some people that led him to New York City. He was working as a dishwasher there. And then, just like opportunities kept coming his way. He took them when they came. It led him to just pretty much build an empire. He met my mom in Florida, and then the two of them went on to build 26 restaurants across the Southeast. And so I pretty much grew up in that hustle, hardworking environment. I grew up in the kitchen alongside my parents. And as they were traveling and building and scaling and all of that, I got to see it firsthand. And I just knew I just loved what they were doing. And I was so inspired. I knew I needed to find my path, and I wanted that energy in my life.
26 restaurants.
Not speaking any English. Really, it was a different time then. The way that they did business then is different than the way we do it now. But he just made it work. He worked harder than anyone else. And my mother just complimented him so well. She was so genuinely interested in people and doing business together. And my father was just making it happen behind the scenes. And so it's just a remarkable story. I was very inspired by them. And then I wasn't risk averse. Like I always just leaned into the things that excited me, just like my father. And I knew after the first year of working in the corporate world, it just wasn't for me. I was incredibly unhappy. I would find myself saying, there's got to be something more.
With that background, I would think maybe you'd go and study entrepreneurial finance or business. What drove you to study engineering?
Growing up in the Asian household, you either went to school to be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, or in academia. Those were your four choices. Our parents immigrated to this country so that our children could have a better life. The last thing my parents wanted was for us to start our own business and to work so hard in life. Like it's a hard life being restaurant owners, and they wanted something better for us. And so I tried the medicine route like all of my other Asian friends. There was no interest in that. And then I landed at Georgia Tech, which is an amazing engineering school. And I was like, which engineering program can I do to just graduate? What's the easiest engineering track that I could do to just finish the program? I knew freshman year, I wasn't going to be a doctor. I failed all my science classes and I was just stuck. I was like, where do I go from here? Do I do liberal arts? I can't do liberal arts at an engineering school. I just need to finish and find a track that I can somehow like leverage into the business world later. I finished industrial engineering and they call it imaginary engineering at Tech because it is like the easiest engineering program there is at that school. And so I finished.
By easy, we should put that in air quotes, right? Because there is no easy engineering program, right?
I was just lost. I was just lost in school. I knew that I just needed to finish the program and take advantage of the resources and the opportunities that came my way. And somehow I would figure out where I needed to go. And I tell everyone that's in their 20s, that's what it's supposed to be about. You know, you're not supposed to have it figured out your freshman year in college. You're supposed to try a little bit of this, try a little bit of that, and lean into what you're most passionate about. And so I've always had an interest in photography. My father handed me a camera when I was 12 years old and I worked for the school newspaper at Tech, and I just didn't think that there was opportunities there to make a career out of it. And so first year working in the corporate world, hated my job. And I was being groomed for an executive role by the leadership in my company. And I just was like at school, very lost. I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be on a different path, but I just didn't know where to go. Then I met my husband, Q, at a happy hour. I was out with some colleagues and he came out as well. He was actually in a graduate program, had nothing to do with work. It was just mutual friends. And we started talking one night, and I was sharing with him how unhappy I was with my job. And he said, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And I was like, oh, no one's ever asked me that. I don't know. I'd do something creative. I really love photography. How amazing would it be to like travel the world with your lens and to photograph people? I always love connections I make with people. And so that would be really exciting to me. And so he said, well, let's figure out how to make that happen.
That was the first night that you met him that he said that?
It's the first.
Did you go home and say, I'm going to marry this man?
Did not because I was actually dating someone else at the time. But there was definitely a connection very early on. I just loved the way he thought and I loved his perspective and everything. He was just so interesting. And to this day, we love most about each other talking with one another and the conversations that we have. And so that conversation definitely sparked the momentum that would come after.
How long had you been working in the company at that point?
6 months.
Just 6 months. Holy cow.
Yeah.
If you could go back and talk to college freshman Alice, what advice would you give her? Or even high school Alice, what would you tell her?
Just to be comfortable with the discomfort. I think that I look back at my college experience, and while I was there, I was uncomfortable. I was stuck. I was lost. But I credit so much of who I am today to those years of discomfort. And I don't regret any bit of it. I was supposed to be lost. I was supposed to question the decisions that I made. I was supposed to fail in those engineering courses and the science courses because it led me to where I am today. And so many of the younger generations that are stuck and they feel like they're supposed to know all the answers very early in their life. You know, I just feel like the inspiration and the exciting parts of life comes when we're patient and we allow those moments to come into our lives when they're supposed to happen. And so we're just always in such a rush to find the answers, to be inspired every day and to lead this amazing, beautiful life. But I feel like that comes after sometimes some years of discomfort and hardship. So
Walk me through the transition when you made the pivot from this engineering job to photography and launching Park Studios. What was that like?
So it was right around the time when my parents were talking about retiring and they really wanted someone in the family to take over the family business. My mom has been begging me for years. And so I wasn't 100% sure about photography. I was still figuring it out. And I said, okay, let me give you a year. This is the perfect opportunity to leave my job. I'm going to put in my letter of resignation.
How long had you been at the company then?
It was about 9 to 10 months.
9 to 10 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Entry level position, working my way up in the company. And then 10 months in, I was like, this isn't for me. I talked to my manager who was very confused, but I was like, you know what? My parents need me. I feel like I need to go and help them retire. And so I sent in my letter of resignation. We all left on good terms. I was like, I might be back. So I would love to keep the doors open, but I really feel like this is the season in life where I need to be there for my parents. And then within 6 weeks, I knew like my father's not ready to retire. He will never retire. And I needed to go and figure out what I wanted to do with my own life. And to my mom's disappointment, who was very much looking forward to me coming down and taking over the family business, they just both were like, Alice, you need to go find your thing. And my father, of course, being the very entrepreneurial, just like spirit and cheerleader that he was like, Alice, what do you need? Do you need a loan? What can I do to help you start your own trajectory in life? And I was like, well, let me figure out what I want to do, create a business model around it, and go after it. That's what I did. I spent the next 6 months in Valdosta helping my parents out, putting some systems into place for their business to help it run a little bit more smoothly. And then I put together my own business plan. And I was doing long distance with Q, my husband, who was also on the phone with me late at night, like helping me calculate numbers. I had my spreadsheet and I was, projecting $1 million business within the first couple of years. And he's like, let's be a little bit more realistic here. And I remember having this business idea, which I got in Asia. Like I saw and was inspired by a business model in Asia, and I wanted to bring it over to the States. And I was like, this is my time. I need to just go full force. I'm 24 years old. I don't have the financial burdens that most people do when they start their own business, like children and a mortgage and all of the other responsibilities. So I just need to take advantage of it and just lean into this 100%.
Amazing. And you talk about putting together a business plan. Did you have a business background at all or any kind of formal training?
I didn't. I did take advantage of some local classes that were offered in Valdosta at the time. I was there for about 8 to 9 months. And so I took some like accounting courses. I did take a course on how to legally start a business. You teach yourself, you find resources online and you figure it out. I didn't have any formal business education background, but I did watch my parents as they continued to like build their empire. What you learn in business school can actually be hindering for a lot of entrepreneurs because it sometimes limits them from thinking outside the box. And in order to continue sustaining a business, grow it, scale it, and allow it to thrive, you always have to be thinking outside the box. What worked yesterday or last year is not necessarily how it's going to be moving forward. And you always have to keep pushing yourself to just figure out the next three to steps ahead of everyone else.
Last night I was listening to a podcast and I heard a quote from somebody was quoting one of the founders of Netflix. And the quote was something to the effect of innovation ends when the MBAs walk into the room, which is not probably something great to hear as I'm about to start the second year of my MBA. But at the same time, something good to keep in the back of my mind, like you said, that not to be boxed in by all these rules and frameworks that you learn in class, which I found refreshing because I feel like I'm so all over the place.
Mhm.
And so having some of these frameworks to rein me in has helped.
Yeah,
But at the same time, being in all over the place can lead you to some remarkable discoveries.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I
And
believe that you need both. I believe you need the
yeah.
people and you need the MBA people. You need the analytical people and you need the people that are free spirited, ideas up in the sky. That's why my husband and I work so well together. He is the calculating, analytical, cautious, risk averse. Let's think through every possible scenario before we make a decision. And I'm already like jumping feet first, figuring out on the way and making a lot of mistakes on the way, picking up the pieces along, and we work really well together. I read a article about the founder of Netflix, and he was a brilliant thinker, and he also looked at success in a different way, and he needed those people with the MBAs and the years and years of experience to get him to what his vision was.
Yeah.
So I definitely believe you need both.
Do you remember the moment where you said, photography, this is it? I am going to build a photography studio focused on families and kids.
As I mentioned before, during one of my travels to Asia, I saw a business model that I thought was so innovative there. I hadn't seen it in the United States, and it was so popular there. And it was basically like a glamour shot studio for teenagers. And every single high school senior would participate in this like day of pampering, makeup, hair, photographers following them around the city as if they were part of an editorial magazine shoot. And they would finish with this portfolio book about them, highlighting the images captured that day. It was almost like a rite of passage that they all participated in. And it was a billion-dollar industry in Asia, like Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, China, like every Asian country had this brilliant studio model. And I was like, I haven't seen this in the States. I'm going to bring it over to the States. I think the combination of that idea with my love of photography and the creativity involved in this process was so intriguing to me. I hadn't seen it in the States. I saw a successful model in Asia and I wanted to bring it over. And so that's what I tried to do. There was a lot of learning lessons that came along the way. Asian kids are very different than American kids. You go to Asia and you talk to a high schooler there. They don't generally wear a lot of makeup. They very rarely put any effort into their appearance. And in America, it's very different. Girls are glammed up every single day and they go out a lot and they get their hair and makeup a lot. And so the experience of going through that isn't as unique here in the States. Senior girls in high school in the States wouldn't necessarily participate in this experience because it is almost like they're every day. And so I realized hitting the teen market in this photography experience wasn't something that was going to be as popular in the States. And so this was when my husband's sister had a baby. And she and I sat down, and my husband was like, Alice, you need to focus in on children. And that's where you'll make your money because parents spend a lot of money on their children and their babies. And the babies' milestones are very fleeting and you can capture them several times a year. So there's this whole like conversation that happened that really just opened my eyes. And so we pivoted and we decided to just focus on children and families versus teenagers.
There's so much that I love about this. One, travel, and how travel and just wrenching yourself out of your familiar environment can expose you to different ideas and business models and just make you see the world through a different lens, so to speak. But also that you left yourself open to pivoting, that you didn't get locked into this idea and say, no, we are going to make this work, that you recognized the cultural differences and that it wasn't a market fit and allowed yourself to pivot. How long did you chase the teen idea before you realized, this isn't the same, this isn't going to work here because it's just a different market and different culture?
It was quickly. It was probably within 6 months. And I feel like that's so important for an entrepreneur. You've only got so much of a time frame to pivot. If you keep trying to push an idea that isn't working and you're not listening to your focus groups and to your consumers, you're not going to make it as a business. And I learned very early on within a couple of months that this isn't something that's going to catch on quickly. I got a lot of feedback from a lot of my potential clients that this is something that they do every day. It's nothing that special. And maybe you'll get a customer every once in a while who will really buy into this experience and this opportunity, but it's not something that's going to be a booming business idea like you thought, Alice. So just having conversations, knowing who to listen to, who to ask, and figuring out how to pivot along the way.
And being open. I'm just amazed that you left yourself open. It wasn't this trying to force this product on the market when the market didn't want it. It can be so hard because as founders and entrepreneurs, you can become so wedded to an idea. And killing
Absolutely.
off those ideas can be so, so hard when you're so emotionally invested in it, but sometimes financially invested in it
Yes.
too. Yeah.
And it's sometimes not a matter of it being the wrong product, but it being the wrong timing. Maybe the market is not ready for your product, or maybe the region that you're marketing to isn't ready for it. There's so many factors that come into play. You just really have to listen to your consumers, and they always need to be innovating and figuring out next steps and testing and trial and error, and then leaning into the things that really spark. Because if you keep putting out, producing, creating, and innovating, you're going to land on something, something is going to hit, and you just have to keep working hard toward that.
It doesn't end just when you do that first business plan. The real idea that hits might be 12 business plans later,
Yes.
right?
Even my
Yeah.
photography business has transitioned so many times in our 20 years. And I've seen the industry go in 5 million different directions with the onslaught of digital cameras and, of course, the iPhones and all of that. And so I've really had to pivot so many times in our photography business that just we've rid the whole roller coaster ride.
I can imagine like your biggest competition isn't necessarily other photographers, but that little box that we all keep in our pocket
Yeah.
where people are chronicling those moments of change every day of their lives, right?
Absolutely. I've realized in the last 5 years that photography has shifted from being a luxury to being a commodity. And we've had to shift our business model as a result. It's still just as lucrative and it's just as successful as it was before. It's just completely different. And I've seen a lot of photographers in our industry go out of business because they weren't able to shift and they were trying too hard to hold on to a model that just wasn't serving their clients anymore. And so, yeah, it's hard. It's not easy.
What are some of the ways that you've shifted?
So, right before COVID hit, I started to notice a shift in our bookings and our numbers as all business owners were experiencing at the time. And I just surveyed my clients, and I'm very thankful that I have a very engaged social media audience. A lot of people will tell me honestly what they feel comfortable in spending. And so I just surveyed my audience and I asked really hard questions like, what is it about my business? If you haven't hired me as a photographer as of yet, what is it about what we're offering and how we are serving that you want to see different? And as a consumer, what would you feel comfortable spending in an annual photography portrait experience? What are some of the things that you value and want to see more of in your home? What is it about your experience in working with a photographer that you love and don't love? And so I surveyed my audience there and I surveyed my existing clients, and I got a lot of feedback that I never could have imagined. And so it was just that honesty that led me to really sit down, reevaluate what we were offering, and completely shift our model.
And was this like a formal anonymous survey or were they casual conversations with your clients?
Both reached out to some really trusted clients and asked them to sit down with me and share openly and honestly their thoughts on how I can better serve my clients. And so it was really good.
That's great. Now, one thing that I just love about what you do is I love your studio and seeing everything that you do with your studio. It's more than just a photography studio. You have events there for small businesses. You have creativity camps over the summer. You have birthday parties, bridal showers in there. You use that space to the
Yes.
max. Can you talk about the decision to invest in a studio? At what point in your business did you decide to do that?
So we actually decided to prolong investing in a studio. I was in that season of life that I really wanted to be home with the kids as much as I could. And so when my kids were little, I decided work from home, shoot on location, don't worry about all of the additional overhead expenses of operating a studio. That was just where I was in season of life. And so we decided to hold off on investing in a brick and mortar space until the kids were in school full time. And so we landed on this most amazing space in 2016. I remember Q actually discovering it, and I fell in love with it because of the light and the windows and the direction it was facing, all the elements in photography that made that space so perfect. It was actually completely painted in black, so it was hard to envision what it could be. Now it's my studio's all in white, and the light is just perfection all day. And he was like, I found this amazing space, but it's 2 times the square footage that we need. And so we had to sit down and really think about what we could do to make up the additional expenses. And so I was like, well, I don't need to be shooting in that space all the time. So why don't we rent it out in on the days that we're not utilizing it? That's when we brought in our creative circle and our community, and we allowed them so many opportunities to see what could happen in this space. And that's when everyone's ideas just really started to explode. You bring together an a group of creatives and a blank white canvas, and you see the ideas just explode. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was so inspiring to be part of that. And then the idea just took off. It was a blank white canvas with the most perfect light in the most perfect location. And those three entities just made for a beautiful space for people to come together and create. And so we've just had an amazing ride. There were years of that were really challenging though, especially in those early years when we were trying to figure it out. We were stuck and money was really hard. I remember actually getting ready for our 10-year anniversary of our business. We were hosting a party in our space. It was our grand opening of the studio. And the night before, Q was like, well, you've got to stop spending money. We run out of money. We started an organization called NAPCP, which is the National Association of Professional Child Photographers. And we had just finished hosting a conference in California for this organization where we overspent and we lost a lot of money on that conference. This is part of event planning and like planning conferences. It's a big risk, big reward, but sometimes you lose. And that was one of the experiences where we lost a lot of money. We're coming back, getting ready, finishing the build out of the studio where we overspent. And then I'm getting ready for this party and I have no more money left. I have
Wow.
100 and something guests coming the next day, and I don't have money to post the event. I couldn't cancel it at the time, but I literally had $0 left that I could spend. So all of my friends gathered. They all brought something to the table so I could at least host this event. Leslie and Janie and my friend Chappie actually showed up to this event with food in hand so that I could feed my guests. And then one of my designers came with buckets of flowers, and she's like, Alice, I've got the flowers tonight. I'm going to arrange them beautifully for this event. It ended up being a beautiful evening. It was a celebration of friendship and of all the hard work that led to that moment and all the things that we would create and do and host in that space.
Was Q working full time for the business as
Yes.
well? Or okay. And at what
Yes.
point did he come on board full time?
Early,
Early.
within the first year almost of business.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you
So
both were all in.
yeah, 100%. He was working on his doctorate and he was working full time as a researcher. And first year in business, it took off. And I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna have to shift something. I'm gonna have to bring on a lot of help." And Q was like, "You know what? I'll put my dissertation on hold." He was all about dissertation. And he was like, I'll put it on hold. I've got 10 years to finish that thing. And he went in full time and we just continued growing and scaling the business. And then, of course, time passed. He lost his opportunity to finish his dissertation, which he still talks about today, but he doesn't regret it. Like we both are exactly where we're meant to be. And this very much is a family business. And yeah, I couldn't have done it without him.
It's amazing how much your community has contributed to this, how much you're finding that ideal partner too has contributed to the growth and you finding this business and you finding what you were ideally suited to do.
Yeah.
If you ever had moments of doubt, I suppose for you and Q, that was it. How did you find the tenacity to push down all those feelings of doubt and push on?
Yeah, it was a challenging time for us. We talk about that period in our business and our life a lot. I remember going to the grocery store and having every single credit card decline when I was trying to buy a rotisserie chicken for dinner. That's how tight money was back then. And I remember having a conversation with my husband and like asking him, do we need to close down the studio? Do we need to pivot? Do I need to go back into the workforce? And because for small business owners, health insurance and all of the things we were paying out of pocket for a lot of things, and just questioning whether this path of small business ownership was for us. We have fantastic educations. We were brought up by parents who immigrated to this country so we wouldn't have to work this hard and struggle so much. What were we doing wrong? were we making bad decisions this entire time? Should we pivot and go back to the life we hated, but had comfort in and was more secure in? And so those were the really hard questions that we had to ask. And ultimately, we had to have more conversations regarding our existing business model and figure it out. We was just like, you know what? Let's spend another year just trying to figure out what our consumers want and what our market is ready for. And let's just push really hard through this and do everything that we can to try to make it work in the next year. And if in another year we're still in the same spot, then we'll reevaluate. And so having those really difficult conversations and really just asking the hard questions of what we really want out of this helps us make the best decisions for our family. Because that was a period that was very different than when I started. I didn't have children yet, and I was able to take bigger risks in life. But then 10 years ago, when we were relaunching our studio and having this grand opening and money was so tight, I had to ask harder questions because I had more at stake.
I love that you didn't make a knee jerk reaction. You gave yourself that year. Even when you started and you said, I'm going to give this 6 months to a year and see where it leads. I feel like so many people get caught up in the doom spiral
Yes.
and they make knee jerk reactions and they throw everything away too quickly. So,
Right.
having that tenacity and that presence of mind to believe in yourself and believe in your idea and give yourself that time, I think it really takes a lot of fortitude. Were you able to be honest with your parents about your struggles during that time and get any advice? Or was it like, no, 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 everything's great, mom and dad, because you didn't want to worry them? How was that relationship?
No, I have a very close relationship with my parents, and they're one of the first people I call when I'm having struggles in any department. And so I love that they understand me more than anyone, and they understand the struggles of small business ownership and the hardships that come with it. It's part of the journey, it's part of the excitement. And they know and understand that when there are years of hardship and discomfort, you really have to sit, you have to listen, and you have to be patient with what's to come. Don't make those knee jerk reactions. Don't ever make big decisions when you are in the highest of highs or the lowest of lows. So that they understand more than anyone. And so they just knew that we had to sit through this discomfort. We were going to figure it out and we were going to make the best decisions for our family.
And today, your business is in a great place.
It's in a great place now.
They must be so proud.
They are, and, it's funny, Carrie, because when I started, my mom was so against it. She was doing everything in her power to stop me because she thought I was making a huge mistake, and I look back and I'm such a people pleaser. I wanted to make this business a huge success so I could prove my mother wrong, but all along, I just realized she only wanted what was best for me. She was my biggest cheerleader, just like my dad, and, she couldn't be more proud, so
So then when I see these events at the studio, how much of them are events that you yourself organize and how much of it is part of that creative community coming in and leasing the space?
So, as we started to pivot and we started to scale back on me being the primary photographer for the business to hiring a team of photographers so that we could execute these signature portrait events like Santa, like Easter, like Mother's Day, we started leasing the studio out less and less. We still have our circle of creatives in the community who will use the space to host things that they want to do, like workshops and small events and showers. But we stopped marketing that because the signature portrait events were doing so well. And so I would say right now we're at 75 to 80% our own events in the studio.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a huge shift in our business. We started to see the numbers completely transform when we shifted to doing more of these and less the luxury model of the portrait experience.
I imagine it's easier for you in a lot of ways too. You don't have to be running off to all these environmental photo shoots, worrying about weather,
Yes.
worrying about having to reschedule because the weather and then have all these schedule conflicts. You are in one space that you really can control
Yes.
and
Mhm.
just crank those people on through.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, I hate to say that, but
yes, I know. I don't mean
we
to.
have
Yeah.
perfected the experience, it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like something that is more like an assembly line, it feels truly like a unique experience that everyone experiences differently when they come. But, over the last 5 years, we have really perfected every little detail of that, and it's worked for us. And I know we're gonna have to shift it again and continue to improve it, and there's gonna be a moment in our industry where it's gonna shift again, and we'll have to change it to something completely different again, but that's the fun of it.
Well, and this is what I love about your model too. And I haven't been to any of these events, but just seeing the coverage that you have on social media, and we got to get to that because your social media is astounding too. But these are not your Kmart Santa photo sessions where, again, they just crank people through. You really curate an experience for
Yes.
people. And I think that makes such a difference to people too when you go with Santa.
Yeah.
And it really is a full 360 experience. It's not just now it's your time in the booth sitting on the man's lap.
We really sat down and thought hard about the experience from start to finish for the children and, of course, for the parents. We wanted it to be as little stress for the parents as possible and as magical for the children as possible. And so when they come in for their photography session, the portrait experience itself is so minute. They don't even know they're coming to get their portraits taken. They really feel like they're coming to an amazing party. And that's what they remember. They remember the experience as soon as they walk in the door, the environment, all of the different elements to it, and the details that make it so special. Those are the memories that they take away. And then as a bonus, they get some beautiful portraits and photographs.
So you really sat down and you thought through what are the pain points for the parents in this situation? What are the pain points for the kids? What are the elements that keep the parents from getting great photos, which also makes it difficult for the photographers as well? You really thought through that and thought, how can we attack all those moments and make this a different experience than the typical?
Yes. Before, the model was that photography is the big expense and it's a big investment. And so already going into it, you're stressed out as a parent. You're making the decision to invest in a photographer and she comes at a price tag. And so I want everything from my husband's mood to my children's outfits to where we're photographing, which is our home, to be perfect. And I have to do this and this and this and this to ensure that everything is perfect before the photographer even steps foot in our house. And then when they're actually here, there's this immense amount of stress that goes into making sure my family is perfect, like our moods and our outfits and everything so that the memories that we take away from the experience are perfect. I could just feel the amount of stress every time I walked into a client's home. That stress leads to all these things happening behind closed doors that I got to experience and witness. But I just knew that I wasn't serving my clients well when I put that amount of stress on them from this experience. And so when I surveyed them, I learned more about their pain points and I really wanted to remedy that. And so we started to offer these mini micro sessions
Uh-huh.
that made it less about the photography experience and more about the experience of walking in the door and it just being full of joy and magic. That's what we wanted the big takeaway to be. And then, of course, trusting our team to ensure that we capture the most amazing memories in the process. Also, the micro mini sessions allowed us to really cut down on our pricing. So instead of spending an hour with each client, we're spending 7 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes. And we're able to schedule them back to back, which in turn leads to the same profit margin for our business, but makes it less stressful for them to be perfect and on for an hour versus 7 minutes or 10 minutes.
And yet the experience itself is so much larger than those 7 minutes because you have so much else going on in the
Yes,
studio.
right.
That's great. Now, brand extensions are always tricky, and I know you do have your creativity camp. You have these conferences that you've put on. How do you decide? Because I imagine you have 1,000 ideas of things that you could do and directions you could run in. What filter do you apply in deciding what you're going to chase and what you're going to rule out?
Yeah, I still haven't figured that out, Carrie. I like to chase everything until it burns me out. I really have always been the type of person to lean in to what excites me. And I also realize like there may be seasons of life where I can do that and try it. And so I just never want to live a life of regret. If there's something that really excites me and I really want to try, I go after it. And there's like a formula in place to building a brand and marketing it in front of the right people and building an experience around it and launching it. And so over the last 20 years of doing business, I've figured out that formula. And we've been pretty lucky and fortunate in the fact that the brands that we've launched have really caught on. Of course, there have been some attempts in the past where we've launched something and it didn't quite work out, but we've been able to pivot and put something out that people really love. Of course, Creativity Camp being one of them, which is essentially like a summer camp experience for young girls between the ages of 8 to 12 years old. The idea happened because of my experience as a 12-year-old girl and my father handing me my camera, which led me on this path and also helped me navigate through some of the more challenging years of my adolescence. And so creativity came into place. Also, I created it for my young daughter who is so creative and also very introverted. And then that experience has evolved over the years, but it's caught on so quickly. I've been able to teach other business owners and creatives across the globe on how to bring that experience to their hometown. So I feel like when an idea hits you, if you stay up all night thinking about it, you need to make sure you have your ducks in a row with all of the other businesses that are going and sustaining you and your family, and then you just chase after that.
I keep hearing how you hear when your consumers can't invest as much as they have been in your product, and you've pivoted and found other models so that your business isn't taking a hit. You're just finding a way where you can still offer high quality and even a better service, a service that serves their needs even more, while still being able to reduce costs for them. I just love that. Now, your business has grown as social media has grown. And like I said, your social media game is so on point. How did you develop those skills? Because it is a real skill mastering social media. Is this something that you made a concerted effort to master?
So yes and no. I feel like as a trained photographer, there are going to be some skill sets that are naturally in place that helps with the social media. I am a storyteller by trade. That's what I do for a living. So naturally being able to tell stories on social media has allowed me to grow. And then some of the things that I've had to learn and figure out and study are like the algorithm and how it works and trial and error of when to post and measuring the engagement that comes from that and really studying the metrics, how often I post, when I post, and when that converts over from followers to clients. And so I've really had to just really pay attention and allow this tool to be an extension of who I am as a brand. And so also really just leaning into having fun with this. If social media is something that is painful or challenging on a daily basis or something that you have to spend hours and hours and hours doing, I don't think it's something that you need to be investing in yourself, your time. You need to be like outsourcing it to someone who does do this effortlessly and has fun with it because you are forcing yourself to post, it comes across and your audience sees that. And so I have just had a lot of fun with it. It has allowed me to connect with so many more people. I view social media as my community. I give a lot and I receive a lot from them, just as much as I share the things like the parenting hacks and the small business lessons that I've learned as I'm sharing them. They're sharing with me and I'm learning from a broader community versus just going through life myself. And so I feel like it's just a big friendship circle, just like your mom group that's learning alongside of you on how to be a better mom. This circle of social media followers have become my circle of friends. And so I'm loving it.
And it's no surprise that you've put the same amount of research into figuring out those analytics and the timing of the posts and frequency and topics and all that. I mean, as much as it might seem to some that social media is just about throwing a bunch of content out there, no surprise that you really dug in and really studied the art and science of it too. Are there any resources that you recommend to people who maybe they're not great at the social media game, but they enjoy it and they don't want to outsource it?
There's one called the Social Club. It was founded by a good friend of mine here locally, and she does a lot of trainings and teachings. Her platform and her site is a wealth of inspiration and education that she freely shares with her followers. And so I feel like finding something that or a resource that interests you, also don't be afraid to just Google it. There are a lot of experts out there that freely share the changes in social media and the algorithm as they're happening in real time. And so, what worked for us yesterday isn't necessarily going to work for us tomorrow. Don't be afraid to continuously learn and learn from your own mistakes. Like for me, social media, while it's fun and effortless, it still takes up time. And so when I put together a reel, launch it, and disappointed because my views and numbers are low, I'm like going and backtracking and figuring out why, so that the next time I post, I get a better engagement.
It's the art and it's the science. You mentioned going through that period of growth where you decided to bring on photographers. Walk me through that decision because that must have been scary. It's no longer just about you and Q and your kids.
Yeah.
Now you're bringing on other people who are dependent on you. How terrifying was that?
So that is a hard decision in terms of letting go of control as a creative. That's always very hard. When you have always been the principal photographer, the visionary behind every single moment captured, and you're letting go of that and you're empowering someone else to do it, that's always very terrifying. But I knew that I didn't have the energy that I used to have 10 years ago in photographing children, and it takes this very special energy to photograph children well. And so I just felt like I needed to bring on younger, energetic, joyful photographers on my team that just was so hungry to learn, so hungry to capture amazing moments, and so hungry to be part of a team, what I was 10 to 15 years ago. And so it's been just transformative for me as a creative. I've poured all of my energy into my photography team, not just in them as photographers and creatives, but them as their own business owners. They have businesses of their own that I love to support and love to empower them with some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. And so we've been able to build this amazing team. We are very much a family unit. I support them just as much as they support me. And it just makes also being in this business less isolating, you know? And so instead of just being a one person show or a two-person show, like we have this incredible business family that we work with and we go through everything together. So it's been amazing.
I've been meaning to ask this from the start. Did you have formal training as a photographer? And do you look for that in the photographers you hire? Do you find that important?
So your first question, no, I'm completely self-taught. And in my photographers, I look for it's just a very low barrier of entry. Their skill set is important and their eye is important, but more importantly is their character, their personality, and their heart. And so when I interview new team members, whether they're photographers or studio managers or web designers, anybody, it's those are the three traits that I look for: personality, character, and heart. Everything else is trainable. Everything else is figure outable. And I just make sure that they are people that I actually want to work with. And then once I have them on my team, I pour into them what I do know, and then we learn together what they don't know. And so I also look for people that will stay on our team long term. So family members that will grow alongside with us versus leveraging this as an opportunity to get them to their next place in life. I've had to learn that the hard way over the years, finding the perfect team members, but I feel like we've landed in a really good place.
And I think that's such great wisdom across any industry, too. Finding those people that you want to work with and people who have that good character and personality and attitude and that willingness to learn, people who are teachable. You are always so generous in sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience, sharing the lessons learned with other women and helping them grow. Do you have any advice that you want to share with women who are sitting there in the jobs that they absolutely hate, their corporate jobs, staring out the window saying there has to be something better, and they have a dream or perhaps a half dozen ideas of businesses that they want to pursue? What would you tell them?
Oh gosh. It's so hard. Just really lean into what excites you the most and figure out, most importantly, how to monetize what you love. The business aspect of being a creative is often one of the biggest things that's overlooked that leads to a lot of creatives failing. And I hate that. I was very fortunate in being able to grow up seeing my parents prioritize making money. And for us as creatives, it's so easy for us to prioritize creating the most amazing art for this world. But if we don't know how to monetize that, we're just creating art for the sake of creating art. And that is amazing and beautiful in itself. But if you want to lead what's not making you happy, you have to figure out how to monetize. And so part of creativity camp is like putting on an entrepreneurial hat and all of these girls. First, you want to find what you're passionate about, right? And discover that. And then the next step is figuring out how to monetize that, putting in that entrepreneurial hat on everybody and letting them know that everything that they create can be monetized. You just have to figure out what your consumers are willing to spend and how you're able to create so that it appeals to your market. So it's just don't underestimate the power of the business side of creating. It's very important. And if you can figure that out, you can do anything, truly.
I love that so much. And if you don't have that side, finding
Finding,
tools and resources and people who do, and perhaps marrying them so that they're making sure you don't, end up in prison for non-payment of taxes,
oh
right?
my gosh. Yes, exactly. Find that person and marry him. No, we've just been very blessed. I don't know how else to tell this story except it's just been a series of blessings and years of discomfort and leaning into what you really love.
I love it. So one last question. What does the future hold for Park Studios?
What I'm leaning into towards now is trying everything and anything that excites me. And so we're actually rebranding right now, and I'm creating an umbrella of the different brands that we've created over the years. And I'm not stopping at photography, Carrie. I feel like I have so many ideas and so many unique gifts that isn't only about photography or isn't only about building community, which is what our whole emphasis on all of our business models have been about. I'm really just leaning into all the things that I want to try. I feel like life is too short. And in a lot of ways, it's scary to kind of start over and try things that you know nothing about, or you have to start from scratch versus being 20 years in a business that's so comfortable and working and like, on autopilot. But I feel like I've done my work in what we've created. It's running so smoothly and I've got my eye on it and I'm managing it well. And I've put the perfect people in place for it allowed to run well. And now I'm leaning into trying new things and discovering new things that excite me. So I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm excited.
I love it. This has been chock full of so many great life lessons, so many amazing business lessons as well. Thank you for your honesty, for your generosity of time, and for sharing your wisdom. I so appreciate you, Alice Park.
Oh, I appreciate you, Carrie. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Alice Park for sharing her story. I was so impressed with her ability to find value in the difficult parts of her journey, a good reminder to us all. I also appreciated how she was able to read the market and distinguish between an idea that wasn't working, like those glamour portraits for teens, and one worth hanging on to, like the purchase of her studio space. Want to learn more about her creativity camp and holiday micro sessions? Go to parkstudios.co. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Want to share your own entrepreneurial journey? We'd love to hear from you at thefemalefoundersproject.com. Thanks for listening and keep innovating.